Bienvenidas, bienvenidos todos, todes. Yaatse, yaatse, apene. How did I do? That is welcome in Navajo.
And good.
And I'm here with my colleague from San Antonio. My name is Deb Palmer. I'm from CU Boulder, and my colleague from San Antonio is Katie Henderson. She just waved at you, but you can tell also she's got the UTSA behind her. I'm going to share the slides for the first bit here, but my first request is actually for all of you all to share who you are in the chat. Just give us a sense of our audience and share, where you're joining us from and what and where do you teach, so that we get some sense of where everybody's coming from. Let me make sure I do this right this time. Yes, right? You can see my slides? Yeah. And I'm going to keep it on the notes version here because I'm going to be flipping back and forth between it, and I want to make sure to be able to see you all. Zoom sometimes makes that hard for me. So the notes version is fine because a lot of you, you're welcome to join us over there too. So you'll see our notes either way. Let me open up my chat before we totally get started.
All right.
Come on, folks, don't be shy. If you're here, go ahead and introduce yourself. Awesome.
So are we saying it or are we just typing it?
Throw it in the chat for us for time's sake, and we can get everybody in that way. Thank you, Griselda.
Buenos días.
Oh, we're coming from all over the Denver Boulder area. Arvada.
Elementary.
Jeffco. We've got coaches. ELD coordinator. That's awesome.
Oh, cool. AP Spanish at high school.
Welcome, Ingrid. Okay, well, keep doing that, and as people come in, hopefully they'll add to it. And meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So Katie and I recently had the honor to have a book published, and this session is basically centered around that book. And I'm going to put it right in front here so you can see, though my blurring makes it hard. There you go. There's our book. And so we've designed this session around the book, Dual Language Bilingual Education, Teacher Cases and Perspectives on Large Scale Implementation. On our agenda, we'll start off with some overview, some talking at you in the beginning about the book and about the origins of the study that inspired it. And then we're going to move into some discussions of the case studies. The book is basically 6 case studies of teachers in various contexts and various grade levels and spaces who have various kinds of ideologies, all implementing dual language in the same urban school district with the same dictated model. And the variation among the cases is what this book is thinking through, So we'll go through the cases with you and get your thoughts on them too. And then at the end, we've got a breakout activity. Good idea, Katie. Can you throw the book information into the chat?
I will.
At the end, we've got an activity that hopefully you'll stick around for, so you get to talk to each other a bit about some of the key issues in the book. All right. So kicking it off, the research questions that guided our book were: first, how do teachers make sense of sometimes contradictory mandates from their leadership? And second, number 2, what does top-down large-scale implementation of dual language bilingual ed look like on the ground? So this study took place in a large urban district in Texas that was implementing the Gomez model, the 50-50 model that comes out of South Texas of dual language bilingual ed in starting in 2010. And the district, here's some stats from the district, but this implementation process took place over 7 years. And ultimately, all 60-something of the transitional bilingual schools that they had in the district, which were Tinley schools basically, had moved over to a dual language bilingual education model. As you'll probably tell, it's not a uniform experience across the district, and it's been messy, as you can imagine. But that was the intention of the initiative when we entered the site in 2010, to study the whole process and to partner with them. So a few important ideas undergird our study. First, the notion that language education policies are the joint product of the educator's constructive activity, what you do, as well as the context in which that activity is built. Good educators don't blindly follow a prescribed text or march to an imposed language education policy, but instead draw on their own knowledge and understandings in order to teach. And that second one in particular makes me think about Sue's keynote this morning. For folks who were able to be there, was very inspiring. Sue, my colleague, was talking about the ways in which we as educators need to draw on our experience and our understanding to move forward in teaching and advocating for bilingual kids. There's a way in which we need to define our terms a little bit, and language ideologies can mean, teacher language policies can mean a lot of different things. And we mean all those different things. We mean both explicit or articulated policies, things that are like the dual language program model, or stated or written language policies in the classroom, like this is Spanish time, everybody, or statements that reflect how students should use language, like don't code switch, it's bad, right? Those are all explicit language policies. And there's also implicit and embodied ones, such as the kinds of ways that teachers themselves are using language in this classroom space, or how they react to the different language practices their kids are using, or different spaces that are created in the classroom for language use by language use. Those are more implicit, but both explicit and implicit language policies impact students' experiences in your classroom. Both are connected to your personal and to your institution's beliefs about language and bilingualism. In other words, what you say you are doing and what you're actually doing both matter, right? So for transparency, therefore, here's what we believe. We believe, first of all, that teachers are key language policy makers who negotiate and interpret multiple intersecting layers of language policy. We believe that linguistic diversity is positive and diverse language practices are valuable for the language ecology of communities, including schools and classrooms. And we believe that language is a practice that is both crafted locally and influenced by macro social processes in the community around you. So the study here went on for 5 years during the first implementation of this dual language program in this district. We used multiple methods, and we had multiple positions within the study and within the district. I was a parent in the district, also a researcher, and also a collaborator and supporter. And Katie was a doctoral student and also a supporter with a collaborator with teachers on the ground and a co-researcher. We're both former dual language bilingual teachers, both current teacher educators, both white, and both bilingual, sequential bilinguals. So we're going to now present 6 cases one at a time. And as you listen to each teacher case, be thinking about this. Be thinking, how do you connect or not to this teacher and why? And please feel free to share your thoughts in chat. After each pair of teachers, we're going to give some space for chat conversation to happen and give you some more guidance on that when we get to it. I'll pop that question into the chat, and I'm going to hand this over to Katie. Shall I keep sharing? Yeah, I'll keep sharing.
Yes, I'll let you know when to go to the next slide. So I get the most fun part of the presentation, which is I'm going to talk you through these different teacher cases. And the way that I'm going to do it is, as Deb explained, I'm going to present 2 teachers at a time that represent our sort of different categories that we categorized these teachers. So first, I'm going to start with introducing you to Marisol and Rachel, who were implementing the model with fidelity. And then I'm going to introduce Mariana and Lisel, who struggled to implement the dual language model, and explain why. And then the last is the teachers, Michael and Olivia, that adapted the model to fit their local context. And something that's really important is that, we categorized these teachers into these 3, themes, but in reality, it's a lot more complicated than that. So I do want to just sort of mention the fact that even though we've identified Marisol and Rachel as implementing with fidelity, that doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't instances or practices that overlapped or was complicated. So I do think that anytime we categorize, we want to kind of acknowledge how that can sometimes be problematic. And, you know, these teachers, this was at one point in time. So, you know, it's hard to know too, like what they might be doing now. So I always like to point that out. We, as major teacher advocates, you know, this is a different processes. So with that said, I'm going to move on to the first teacher, and I'm going to provide you a glimpse into her class from Marisol, and then I will talk you through her articulated and embodied policies. So Deb, you want to go to the next slide?
Whoops, sorry. So I also wanted to quick say, don't forget, we are having a raffle at the end. We forgot to tell you. We're going to raffle off 2 copies of this book. I happen to have extra copies at home, so stick around to the end. We're going to raffle off a couple of copies.
Yes, very exciting. So we're going to start with Marisol. So this is a glimpse into her one-way pre-K classroom. So Marisol prepares to transition to science. She places the English math book, Dora's Eggs, aside and pulls out the Spanish book, Pollito Chiquito, and says in Spanish, "Esta semana en ciencias vamos a aprender sobre un montón de alemanes y los sonidos que hacen." A few students clap, Diego shouts, "Ya sé!" and Marco shouts, "Yes!" So you can visually see on this slide that as she's transitioning to science, all of her language becomes in Spanish, right? Because she is doing the model with fidelity where science is supposed to be taught in Spanish and math is supposed to be taught in English. So Deb, if you want to go to the next slide. So when I talk through these different teacher cases, we had our framework about what they say they're going to do for their language policies in their classroom, and then what they are doing, right? What is their embodied implicit policies? So for Marisol, she had this fidelity to the model with separation of languages for instruction. And so that was an explicit articulated policy that she would talk about. She was very committed to doing the dual language model with fidelity. She also articulated negative statements towards language mixing. So she said, "Lo entiendo, pero no creo que es apropiado. Deberíamos de captar un idioma, tener una buena fundación y después agarrar el otro." So here we see in many ways, language models that strictly separate language fits that belief, right? That you don't mix them and that you need to kind of have one and then the other. And something that actually was an explicit policy decision that she made was that Marco, who on the previous slide shouted out yes, even though it was Spanish time, right? He didn't say sí. Marco was a much more simultaneous bilingual that engaged in both English and Spanish language practices. But Marisol felt that because he mixed his languages so much, it was actually the bilingual education was not the right context for him, because she was worried that he didn't have a strong enough foundation in either language. So she actually suggested, and for the following year, that he would be placed in a mainstream classroom. And so Marco was removed from bilingual education based on that ideology. So Marisol had these articulated policies, but then, you know, what did she actually do in her classroom? So from what I observed, it was very aligned with this separation. So math was taught in English, science, social studies taught in Spanish. She always responded to students in the language of instruction. And she also even disproportionately responded to students during English with students that used English. So if a student used Spanish during English time, she would respond. She might not respond to that student. And then if a student was speaking English, she would respond in English. But something that was really interesting was that students actually engaged in different language practices using non-standard varieties. And she never was observed to correct students. And when I asked her about that, there was one day, there was even an announcement over the whole school saying, you know, puedes mover tu troca, right? And that seemed to be a very like marked case of Spanglish, using troca, which is the, you know, taking on the English word truck and making it using the Spanish troca. And she actually said, you know, I don't correct it because I actually don't like I engage in those practices sometimes myself, and that's bad. Like I don't have strong enough Spanish or English myself. So something that made this case a lot more complicated was Marisol herself articulated some internalized deficit perspectives towards her own bilingualism, which sort of then, is important to contextualize the ways that she was articulating and embodying these sort of multiple language policies in her classroom. Okay, going on to the next. So Rachel is the next case that we had categorized as somebody with engaging fidelity to the model. And so here's a glimpse into her classroom. After finishing a mini lecture in math on fractions entirely in English, Rachel directed her students in English, we are going to work on some fraction math problems. Please get with your bilingual partner. Rachel delivered the instructions orally in English. Rachel began to walk around and monitor the room. She walked up to Anna and Monica and asked, "How are you doing? Do you have any questions?" Anna responded to the teacher, "No, we are good." Anna points to the math problem in front of her and turned to her partner Monica and asks, "What do you think this number is?" Rachel, the teacher, walks away to another table, and once Rachel is out of earshot, Monica then asks Anna, "Wait, a ver, ¿cuál?" Anna responds, "This one, lo de arriba." So, and you can go to the next slide, Deb. So here we see again, the fidelity to the model was within her articulated policy. She said that they should always be speaking in English. Her class was the English portion of the model. She wanted to, have that separation and have the students fully engaging. And she also made a policy decision to have every single student in her classroom, regardless of their language proficiencies or backgrounds, to take the standardized math test in English. And that's really important, as we'll see in the next dyad of cases. But in terms of her embodied, she was always observed engaging in this, right? So she always kept her language practices to English, despite Rachel being bilingual herself. And then the students were only observed speaking to English to the teacher, to Rachel. However, students spoke in a variety of language practices as soon as the teacher was at a distance, or occasionally as an act of resistance. So when I brought this up to Rachel, she'd be like, they should never be speaking in English. She actually didn't know, in Spanish. She actually didn't know that students were speaking in Spanish in her classroom. And she said, well, I guess sometimes when they're misbehaving, which was also something I observed. So with those two cases of Rachel and Marisol, with this, fidelity to the model, I'd like you to respond. I'm seeing some chat comments already, but how do you relate or not to Marisol's and Rachel's articulated and embodied classroom language policies? And how do you identify or not to implementing a model with fidelity?
So is this a group that would rather speak? Because we can have a few folks speak out if you'd rather. The chat is open for anybody's thoughts. Regardless of the context you're in, what do you think?
Amy, I completely agree with your comment. It was a bit heartbreaking.
That's an interesting way to put it, Sylvia. So fidelity to of implementation to a model, but without a strict separation of language, with more flexibility allowing for students as a compromise that these teachers seem to be struggling with. Yeah.
And I did notice when we first started that there are some of you that are maybe like high school Spanish teachers. And I think it's interesting to think about these articulated and embodied language practices across contexts and the expectations. And I think Deb and I, no matter what, we're very passionate about the importance of reflecting on what you believe and how it impacts different students in classrooms.
And then folks in the chat now are bringing up some really important issues. Sometimes we need to have a lot of emphasis on a minoritized language to ensure it's actually happening, and supporting dual language teachers to know how to stay in the target language, how to focus students on language and ampliando, enhancing their language practices is a balance. It's a challenge. And Kayla, I agree. Context matters infinitely. Mhm. Right. Well, I think it possibly is a good time to move to
okay,
the
well,
next.
I encourage you all. It is I'm going to apologize in advance if I have any internet issues. It just said that my internet was a little unstable. Deb, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
We can hear you.
So we encourage you, okay. We encourage you to continue the chat as I present these next two teacher cases that represented the model. And at the end of the, I will provide 2 minutes to reflect. So the next teacher is Mariana, and here is a glimpse into her one-way third grade classroom. It's 10 a.m. and the classroom schedule displayed on the wall indicates that it's social studies, but Mariana is still teaching math. Mariana circles around the table and crouches down next to Manuel. In a low voice, she begins to walk Manuel through the problem in Spanish. Acuérdate que tienes que multiplicar antes de sumar. As she stands back up, she reminds the entire class in English that they have only 5 minutes left to finish problems 1 through 5. When the time is up, Mariana tells students in English that they will go over the problems tomorrow, but that it is time for English language arts. 10 of the 12 students shuffle to get their books together and line up at the door. Mariana instructs them in English that they may leave to go to their individualized tutoring. Only 2 students remain in Mariana's classroom who received high enough scores on the Spanish reading practice test to not be at risk of failing. She sits down with them at a small table and begins reviewing standardized test problems on reading. So Deb, you can go to the next title. So Mariana, in terms of her, effort to implement dual language, she immediately recognized that hay presión por los exámenes y hay un momento en que no más nos enfocamos en prepararlos. So she kind of immediately articulated that her language policies were being very driven by the amount of pressure they were under for standardized test scores. And so she made an important policy decision that all students should take standardized the math exam in English and reading in Spanish. And that was something I had mentioned with Rachel on the previous one. And I think in the next teacher case, it'll become even more explicit about why that particular language policy decision is so important. She also worked really hard to create independent reading and independent writing time with student language choice. These were sort of these pockets of space that she was able to find right after recess, right in the morning, to have her students engage in that. So in terms of what she then did in the classroom, she said that she did want to have fidelity to the model. But at the end of the day, science and social studies were supposed to be taught in Spanish, and she wasn't teaching them because, as requested by her administrators, she was engaging in math and reading preparation starting in January. She was also, she taught reading in Spanish. And when she was teaching reading, the times that I observed her, I never observed her speaking in any English. So she sort of maintained that fidelity to the model during that Spanish time. But when she was teaching math in English, she would, I observed her multiple times switching to Spanish, working with individual students or to clarify or make a correction. And when I talked to her about that, she said, first of all, she was in a one-way context. So all of her students were English language learners. She herself was from Mexico. And she said, I don't even necessarily know if I'm doing that. It just seems so natural that, if a student has an issue with a math problem, y me están pidiendo en español, lo voy a explicar en español, right? They're going to help the student if the student needs that support in that language at that time. And then the students themselves felt very comfortable to engage in a variety of language practices at all times, particularly during those free language choice periods. Okay, the next teacher case is Lisel, and here's a glimpse into her. Again, these are the two teacher cases that we're struggling to implement. So here's Lisel. To begin her Spanish language arts class, Lisel says, "Good morning, children. Get your motivation reading out." Students scramble to take out their motivation reading standardized test preparation books. Lisel continues in Spanish. El grupo de español, quiero que lean pasaje 1. El grupo de inglés, quiero que lean lo que hicieron para la tarea. So you can go to the next slide. So in this example, you see that she is engaging the students in standardized test preparation, right? This was what was the driving policy in our classroom. She also, Lisel, when you spoke with her, she actually was against language mixing and felt that there needed to be a strict separation of language. But she didn't engage in this when we look at her embodied language practices, because how could she? She was trying to teach two students for standardized test preparation in two different languages. So she herself was constantly switching between languages because half of her students had English standardized test preparation and half of them had Spanish standardized test preparation. So, and this of course was based on the fact that that she wanted to make sure that her students would score the highest they could possibly score based on their language background, which was different than the policy decision that was made by Rachel and by the previous teacher, who had decided that regardless of sort of maybe what score that they would do better in, they would be taking the test in the language of instruction. So we can now go on and give you guys 2 minutes to reflect on this. How do you relate or not to Mariana and Lisel's articulated and embodied classroom language policies? And how do you relate or not to standardized test preparation?
I'm going to take us off the share just for those couple of minutes because I'm having some issues with my own. I keep deleting slides. I think I can't get, I was having trouble with my Zoom. Folks are commenting about the oppressive spaces that these teachers found themselves in, and the ways that English dominates, and even in our bilingual spaces. So true, Liz, so true. Assessment captures a very small piece of our students and what they know and can do, both with language and in any area. And so often the bilingual students' curriculum gets narrowed, as Manuel is pointing out, rather than broadened because of the two languages they have to work with. And the language of assessment definitely drives.
Language of instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the, I have a separate article actually written about this, the way that the teacher's language policy choice for what language to test a student in, which when I did the analysis, there was 12 different ideologies around why you would test a student. Some people would say, oh, it should be the mother's language. Oh, it should be the one that they're the highest in. Oh, it should be based on the language of instruction. Oh, it should be based on the LPAC recommendation. Oh, it should be based on what the child wants, which I thought was a pretty, so there's so many reasons actually why we make these choices, and then they have major consequences in terms of the linguistic experiences in our classrooms because of the external pressures from the institution.
Yes, feeling pressures. People are articulating a lot of the same ideas that Katie uncovered in her research. Awesome. So I think I'll go ahead and share again. And this time, hopefully I won't accidentally delete slides on us.
And these last two teacher cases are the teachers that adapted the model. So again, this was a model with strict separation, as Deb explained at the beginning. And these are the two teachers that took the model and then adapted it to fit their local context. So the first case is Michael, and here's a glimpse into his one-way third grade classroom. Michael asks, "Who is the comediante del día?" And Pedro shouts out, "Soy yo," and assumes a position at the front of the class with a book of jokes in Spanish. Pedro reads the joke. "¿En qué se parecen una abeja y un elevator?" After a few students' guesses, he shares, "Los dos andan buscando de flor a flor." After the classroom laughter dies down, Michael asks the students what made the joke funny. A student raises her hand and explains the double meaning of the word flor y flor in English and Spanish. Michael transitions to science and gives students a new set of instructions in Spanish to continue working on the observation of their crawfish. One student shares with Michael, "Hey, el crawfish se echó para atrás." Michael writes the observation on the board and a student shouts out, "Mister, you're writing in Spanglish." And just something real quick before, just to mention about this, the student, when they shouted out, "Mister, you're writing in Spanglish," it was not, like, "Oh, that's a bad thing, that's negative." He was just identifying, okay, like you have now, mixed your language on the board. And that's what you told us is called, that we call Spanglish here, right? So you can go to the next slide now. So for Michael, he had this explicit articulated policy that was pretty different at the time from many of the other teachers that were in our study. He said, "Oh, I'm a code switching fan. Me encanta Spanglish." And he told students they could speak in any language they wanted. And he had these designated bilingual spaces in his classroom, including the comediante del día. And he also would do science. Every day he had a science song that was done in both English and in Spanish. So these were his articulated ideologies, like, "Oh, I'm a code switching fan." And then when you were in his classroom, his embodiment of that was very much aligned with that articulated ideology. He did not separate his English or Spanish in his classroom for interaction. And the students didn't themselves either. Something that, again, I think is really important when I talk about Michael, there's two things. Michael himself was a white male who had never had negative experiences for engaging in hybrid language practices himself. And I think if you're interested in this, that we have an article written about it. But that also his students were one way. This meant that, again, all of the students in Michael's classroom were English language learners, and he also had recent immigrants in his class. And so it was a space where the potential for English dominance to happen was not a concern in this one-way context. So really, it was just a very kind of unique classroom case with, like, simultaneous bilingualism occurring at all times. Okay, Deb, you want to go to the next case? So the next teacher is Olivia, and here's a glimpse into her one-way pre-K classroom. Olivia and her pre-K students are sitting in a circle on the carpet. Olivia is modeling a math bilingual pair activity. She points out to her students in English that the activity is on a blue tray, so students should complete the activity in English. She repeats the instruction in Spanish. On top of the tray is a blue bucket which contains 5 plastic hanging monkeys and a plastic crocodile. Olivia asks, "Can I have a bilingual student to help me act out this activity?" And all the students eagerly raise their hands. So here, just something to point out right away, Olivia was such a master bilingual teacher, but one of the things is that by saying, "Can I have a bilingual student?" she's positioning all of her students in her classrooms as bilinguals, as people that, that can do this activity in English. Even though, again, in her context, as in pre-K, really the vast majority of these students still engaged entirely in Spanish as a one-way pre-K classroom. So Deb, if you want to go to the next thing. So Olivia was very committed to the model. She had advocated and worked really hard to get dual language to be a part of her campus. But she also felt very passionately that children can engage in any language they want. but that she was very clear and scaffolded the language that she wanted them to be practicing to add to their linguistic repertoires. Hence, we see sort of all these different scaffolds to get them to engage in English, using the blue bucket with the, they were supposed to sing the crocodile eating the monkeys, and they had to act it out with their partner. And so she would even say to them, we're supposed to do it in English, but it's your choice. So I thought that was a really empowering, articulated language policy. In her embodied policy, you could see this. She generally taught in the language of instruction, but with this purposeful dynamic bilingualism. And she would model that. She would model that dynamic bilingualism whenever somebody would walk into her classroom who was a Spanish speaker. If it was English time, she would still, stop and engage in Spanish, because that's what bilinguals do. Usamos los recursos que tenemos en español y en inglés, right? This is, and so she would scaffold that. And similar to Michael, the students engaged in different language practices, including non-standard varieties, which was actually pretty consistent across the cases, is that even with these sort of different categories that we have them doing fidelity or struggling or adapting, I do think that that students often found ways to engage in their language practices with their peers, regardless. So that's another finding. So those were the last two cases. And if I'm seeing, some people add to the chat, but if you want to take 2 minutes and add, how do you relate to Michael and Olivia's articulated and embodied classroom language policies? And then if you want to answer this question too, to what degree do you feel you have agency in your language policies? Yes, we have another chapter coming out with Olivia, where she was a co-author with us on the chapter, and it's going to be in an upcoming, well, it's still in process. I don't know when the book will actually come out, but it's a book with Ofelia Garcia.
Right. Ofelia is quite a, I'm sorry, Olivia is quite a master teacher, but simultaneous bilingual folks tend to do kind of naturally the kinds of things she engaged in. We learned a lot from her, watching her, about what kinds of language practices in a rich, dynamic bilingual space can empower kids. That she was a member of the community she was teaching, so that really helps. We learn from our models are people who engage directly with their kids in co-constructing what it means to be dynamic bilinguals. Got some great comments here.
I know, I'm loving them. I'm loving them.
Thank you all for engaging. The
The
key is purposeful dynamic bilingualism.
And
Yeah.
I'm always authentic, so I always say what I'm thinking. We've done this presentation before, and I do think that the Michael versus Olivia case really speaks to that, how purposeful you're being. I think that Olivia was this very purposeful and the dynamic bilingualism, whereas Michael was really just he had taught for over 10 years. And I think when I observed him, he was in his 10th year teaching, and he had just developed this set of strategies working with his students and his parents that they engaged in a way that sort of worked for that classroom, but it's not particularly replicable, right? You can't just be like, oh, try to act the way that Michael acted, which was just responsive to his students. I analyzed at one point all of the different reasons why he shifted his language practice from English to Spanish. And, there were so many reasons. And so it's very, anyways, food for thought that I'm still thinking about a lot.
And some interesting comparisons, across the 6 cases that we've come to. Olivia and Michael both had advanced degrees and many years experience. They had a lot of status in the spaces in which they taught. They had long tenures and records of success and a lot of confidence in what they were doing. And that matters a lot. New teachers coming in wouldn't necessarily be able to claim the same kinds of agency that Michael and Olivia were able to claim. And some of the other teachers that Katie described were in a more precarious position, in a less secure position, with potentially administrators who weren't necessarily investing in their professional identities and trusting them to make the right decisions for their bilingual kids. So context matters so much, as does the professional and personal identity of the teacher in each space. So that, there's no bashing of teachers here. Everybody's doing the best they can, and every single one of these teachers cares deeply about their kids. It's just that we can see the difference when teachers are empowered and when teachers are given the professional autonomy to make strong and empowered decisions for their kids. What kinds of advocacy can happen and what kinds of instruction are made possible in their classrooms. And you all, it sounds like several of you in the chat are saying some of the same things I am, which is awesome. So what we're wanting to do now, and keep going with the chat. That's a great conversation going on there. I wish we had room for everybody in the same room to be talking, honestly. Next year, right? Next year we will do that. We at the end of our book, we put together 6 guiding questions to support teachers and administrators, educators in general, in thinking through their dual language bilingual program implementation to ensure that teachers have spaces like Michael and Olivia have to do the right thing, to really advocate for kids and to create really empowering classrooms. So these 6 questions, we've actually only once before asked teachers to answer them, like to actually dig in and get to some answers. What we did here was we put Breakout, we put them on the slides. The 6 questions are here on slides, right? And we've given open permission for people to write on these slides. And what we would like to do now is to put you into breakout rooms to take a few minutes each room with one question. And then just a few minutes, to jot down your notes and your thoughts. And when you finish, we'll bring you back here for some more instructions. But you will be sharing your slides across each other. Okay? Did I make sense there? Katie, did I miss anything?
I think you're good. Just be sure to pay attention that when you get broken out into your breakout room, you pay attention to what your group number is, because that's your group number for what slide we want you to be engaging in. And maybe Deb, if you want to share the link one more time so that everybody, I think I can do that too.
There's the slides. In order to see you all and put you in breakout rooms, I've taken off the share. But when you get into your breakout rooms, hopefully at least one person can go ahead and get into the slideshow, and you should have editing. And so you can find that slide, the group number 1 should be breakout room number 1, and talk together about your question and take notes. You can pull images off of the web, or you can just jot some notes down, whatever most serves you in terms of supporting a conversation. How many are we? Let's see, we're about 20. So
we're at 22. So we could do.
If we do 6 groups, that's a very few people per group. So
yeah, I would do maybe even 4
or 5. Yeah, I'll put y'all in 5 groups and we'll see how that works. So we won't talk about number 6. You can look at it. Okay, so groups 1 to 5, go to the slides for questions 1 to 5. Anybody have any questions? All right, I'm sending you out. Alma, you there? Derek? I'm going to pop in and join a group. So call me if you need anything. I think you guys are taking a little break. Anybody, if you need to help getting to your group, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be right back.
Sorry, I was kicked out of the presentation. I was in group 5. Thank you.
Monica, did you get booted out?
Hey, Dr. Palmer. Yeah, my internet is acting so weird today.
¿Cómo
So
estás?
I got lost. Lost my communic before joining the breakout room. So, and it's almost time to stop. I'll be
It
waiting
is
here.
almost time, but if you want to pop in for the last minute or so, which group, remind me where you were?
No, I didn't have the chance
Oh, you
because I
didn't
was
get to
just
join.
waiting, and then my internet it says
Okay.
unstable, and I didn't join. So I will be waiting here. It's okay, Dr. Palmer.
Yeah, I suppose. We have about 3 minutes.
3
No,
minutes?
actually, we get cut off at 11:45. No, we go till noon. Yeah, we have about 3 minutes more. So if you want to go in a group,
Yeah. You send me to any group, and I'll be there just listening. And thank you.
okay. Let me see where.
You see, now the camera is even not working.
I can see you.
Oh, you can see me? Oh, I
Yep.
don't see myself. Okay.
So group 3 is talking about English dominance in the bilingual programs and how we mitigate it.
Okay.
So I'll put you there.
Thank you.
Wait, did I put you? Yes. Did you get an invite? Nope, you're
Not
back.
yet. Now I got it.
Okay. Hello. Welcome back. We're about to do the yank back thing. There we go. Everybody's back. I have to say, it's interesting. One of my biggest challenges when working with teachers in an actual room is convincing myself it's time to bring people back and cutting off great conversations so that we can come back into group. And that's made easy in breakout rooms because all I do is press a button. I'm not even sure what you're talking about in your rooms. I know it's good though, because I can see some things appearing on your slides, which brings me to my next set of instructions. So I'm gonna put you back in the same breakout rooms in a moment. This time your job is to go in and read everyone else's slides and consider their questions and the kinds of answers they started to talk about. And some groups spent more time talking than actually writing things on the slides, and that's fine. But I know there's some stuff on each slide. And so you can feel free this time to use the comments feature in Google Slides to add your own thoughts, your group's thoughts to other people's slides. So we can kind of distinguish whose conversation was primary and then whose conversations are happening on top of it. Okay, I'm going to quick show you where that is just to make sure people know. The comments feature is up at the top. You click here and you say comment, and then it allows you to comment on a slide. Okay, I'm going to cancel that one for now and stop my share. Everybody know what you're up about? What you're supposed to do? Katie can't hear you. Are you silenced?
Okay, got to do that at least once. No, I was just saying that this is the Zoom version of a gallery walk.
Right. Yeah.
Converting our pedagogy online.
Yeah. So if you all had made actual posters in the room, we could do a gallery walk, but that's okay. And there's my cat. He always makes an appearance. Hitting opening all rooms, but please hold back if you have any questions or concerns. And we're going to pop around like we were doing. Katie, you're part of a group, but I've been popping around to the groups and make sure everybody's good. Okay. Wow, all of a sudden room 3 looks like it's got lots of people. I don't know what happened with that, but whatever. Y'all are good. If it's too many people, I can pop in and move someone if you need it. Okay, opening rooms again. So Derek and Alma, if you want to join a room, you are welcome to. I'm going to go ahead and pop into some of the rooms and make sure they're okay. Call me if you need me. Okay. Goodness, that was another one that was hard to pull you away from. We were just starting to see some great comments coming in, and I know that meant that your conversations were just starting to get to that point. But I do want to make sure to give you some of the closing information, and I know they kick us out at noon. So I went ahead and pulled you back. So, you still have access to these slides. Feel free to keep looking and keep commenting. I'm going to share just one last time here so that you can see. Please feel free to continue commenting in chat as well. We can pick up that part where we left off, and I can quick share with you a little bit of information about the book and give you some guidance in case you'd like to get a copy of it, and we can do our lottery. So this is the overview of chapters in the book. And I also, as soon as we finish this, I want your reflections on that activity. I want to know what you thought, but let me quick do this. Our overview of chapters, as you can see, the primary purpose of the book is to share these teacher cases. That takes up, 3 chapters of the book, but we also give some perspective about the study overall and about district-wide dual language implementation and what that's been like in the country. So the book is probably it's for a pretty broad audience, and I think it's a pretty decent book to use for a teacher professional learning group discussions, because you can talk around these different cases and think about your own context, just like we tried to do today. And if you'd like to get hold of it, we've asked the publisher, and they've given us a special discount for CO-CABE attendees. You just use that special code CO-CABE 40. And you get 40% off of the cover price at the publisher's website. And that's good until middle of March. I can put that back up in a minute, but I just want to say gracias. Thank you. And I can drop that also in the chat. So you all found your way to the slides. So hopefully you have them. And thanks again, all of you, for being here and for sticking it out all the way through and for engaging so well with all of us on our questions. And we're curious if anybody wants to turn on your mic and share what that gallery walk was like for you and what kind of key takeaways you'd like to pull out of this.
I really like that. I mean, the activities and those walking galleries too, because the reason that I attended this is to get more ideas, because really I would like that my school can implement this dual language, because our students with the ELD right now, really we are not reaching that goal that they can be successful. It's so sad, like recently these 2 years, all the seniors, I couldn't go the seal of biliteracy, neither the certificate, because they didn't get the right scores in the English. So, and they are brilliant students in the Spanish, but so hopefully my school can implement this. I don't know what's the next step, but I think it's the administration side, right? That they need to decide, right, Palmer?
Yeah, there's a couple of folks here who are at high schools, and it sounds like you're at high school.
Yes, high school, yeah.
Who are implementing dual language, and maybe they can give you some ideas. Who was it who's at Arvada High School? Implementing a dual language?
I am.
See, Kayla.
Yeah, that actually was a really exciting sounding program you got started there. And serving our kids at high school is something we all need to pay attention to in all of the districts. We don't do dual language programs enough with older students who could really benefit, get content and language enrichment, and become biliterate in very short order. A lot of our high school kids.
Sounds awesome, because I am one of the bilingual biliteracy specialists. So I'm just trying to see, well, we need to do this. How can we move? Because my school is like 82% Spanish speakers. So we need that.
You do. Yeah. Thank you for being here and starting to gather that information. You can advocate with your administrators to get it to happen. I think too, an interesting thing to consider is that advocacy on the state level needs to happen, because whatever test they're using, if a kid is biliterate, they should get the seal of biliteracy, and we tend to pick up tests that favor Anglo kids. That's problematic.
I'm going to stick to that.
I'm in Loveland, Colorado, and what we have done with the seal of biliteracy, because in the state it talks about being at I4, which is an intermediate mid, and we realized that when they asked for the SAT test score, it's too high. So we use the Apple testing, from Language Testing International, because I was also a world language teacher for a long time, and we let the native speakers of whatever language they can take the Apple test in English and ask for the same score as we do for second language learners for, if they're Spanish, the same thing. And boy, that has opened up thing. In fact, it really has showed them what their skills are in English. So it's just the Apple test, AAPPL. And it's on the world language site, but it's really good. It's Language Testing International. So.
Thank you. Tony, could you put that name into the chat? Katie's just reminded the Apple testing, that would be great. And Katie's just reminded me, we gotta do our lottery before we close up this room. Now we were gonna do, because I have 2 kids who were raised during this study, and Katie has 2 kids who were born during the writing of this book. We were gonna do person 2 in room 2, but room 2 ended up closed. So we're going to do person 3 in room 3 and person 4 in room 4. And on my list, because I get to look at it, that is Paulina. And it is, we don't have a person 4 in room 4. What about, we have person 3 there, and Yvette. So Paulina and Yvette. If you 2 could drop, and congratulations, if you could drop your email into chat, direct message me, then I'm going to write that down and I can email you for your address and get that out to you. So Paulina, is Yvette still here? Yes, you are, right? Woohoo! And
Yvette's the moderator, or is there?
Oh yeah, it's our moderator.
Yeah, the student moderator.
That's right.
Thanks so much. I was just checking to buy it. Thanks so much. I'm excited.
You're so welcome. That's great. Don't forget to put your email in the chat though. I'm not seeing it yet. There we go. I got Yvette's.
Paulina, put your email. Thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
I learned from you all. I learned something new today, and I'm gonna go look up that Apple, because that was the second person that mentioned it. Interesting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Paulina.Rodriguez Canizares.
Yes, thanks. It's a long one.
I'm writing it down as quick as I can, and I also saved the chat just in case.
Okay, thank you so much, Deb.
So excited.
Thank you, Yvette, for helping us.
Yeah, this was awesome. This was my first CO-CABE conference.
Nice.
I've already learned a lot. My brain is like packed with information. So I'll go ahead and end the meeting. I do have to get to my class too. I'm still doing this at the same time. So thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too.